Thank you, Marcia, for the introduction, and Fernando. Good afternoon from my side. As it was already mentioned, my colleagues and I will give you an insight into the Austrian initiatives for the supporting zero-emission road, freight, and logistics. And I have prepared, the slide for our agenda. We will start with an overview of the strategic plans for the mobility sector. In this part, I will give you a short insight into the Mobility Master Plan 2030. Jakob will follow with information about the master plan for freight transport, and Sarah will round up with some details on Austria's R&I mobility strategy 2030, and will focus here on the era mobility transition. When you have some questions regarding the first part, then there will be a Q&A, and then we will have the second part with our presentations, which are on the measures that are in place in Austria to foster zero-emission logistics and freight. Here we present the e-mobility offensive, where the most of our actual e-mobility funding for vehicles and infrastructure is happening. After that, I will come to our new funding program, ENIN, which stands for Emission-Free Commercial Vehicles and Infrastructure, which will be available in the next months. And I will finish then my part with some details on the program Zero Emission Mobility, and present some projects which were funded here. And Florian will conclude with his presentations about the highlights from the R&I program Mobility of the Future. So now coming to Austria's Mobility Master Plan. Let us now start with a brief introduction. From my side, I'm Reiner Reinbrecht from Austria in the Ministry of Climate Action, and here in the Department for Mobility Transformation. In my function, I'm in charge of many funding schemes for e-mobility, but I'm also involved in other topics regarding e-mobility and decarbonization of the transport sector. So come to the point. So what's the Mobility Master Plan? Austria's Mobility Master Plan is the new climate action framework for the transport sector here in Austria. And the plan itself is structured in 3 pillars. And these are avoiding, shifting, and improving. And these 3 pillars define the goals for passengers and freight transport. As you can see here in the quote from our, about the Mobility Master Plan 2030 from our Minister Leonore Gewessler, the master plan is not a projection of existing systems targeted at 2030, but it's more of a description of the goal formation of climate neutrality in 2040, and a description how we can come here. The goal is that in 2040, all land transport modes are decarbonized, and all the green energy used for transport is generated sustainably in Austria here. But this also means that the amount of available energy is highly limited. So the available energy should be used in the best possible form of mobility. As a result, we needed a backcasting approach. So these are the results of the backcasting approach. Here you can see how different sectors can contribute to climate neutral transport in 2040 in Austria. The biggest share is foreseen by the electrification of all cars and two-wheel motor vehicles. That's why we have concrete exit dates for the registration of cars with internal combustion engines in 2030. The second biggest share comes from the electrification and the use of climate neutral fuels like green hydrogen for commercial vehicle and buses. But also stopping fuel export, as you can see in the last pillar, and changes in the mobility behavior, as in the first pillar, can and should contribute significantly to the goal of climate neutrality in 2040. And if you see here, no, you can see it here. For the commercial vehicles technology pillar, the main measures are a 75% toll reduction for emission-free vehicles, which is in place now. A pilot corridor with high-performance infrastructure, which is actually in the planning, and the ENIN funding program, which I will go on in the second part of our presentation. So as you can see here, the rapid increase of the freight transport has to be stabilized to a sustainable amount and needs to be decoupled from economic growth. As there are more flexibilities in passenger transport, the amount has to be stabilized too. While freight transport as a whole can still grow, this growth has to come from transport in the rail sector, while the road sector should already has reached this peak. But more to that topic in Jakob's presentation. So when we look into the details of the passenger transport, you can see that the amount of motorized individual transport by car motorized individual transport by car has to be reduced to levels as they were in 1959, while promoting more transport in public transport by train or by active mobility. So here you see the modal shift. And the modal shift shows the share of the individual transport modes. Active mobility, for example, has to grow from actually 23% to 35%, while private motorized transport has to decrease from 61 at the moment to 41%. And what is also important is that the different transport modes are operated with the most efficient technology available. And this leads me here. As you can see, we have tried to categorize the most efficient and available technology for the different passenger transport modes. As short distance can be covered by foot or by bike, for long distance by aircraft, there are few alternatives to climate neutral fuels like now. We have decided to fill in the transport modes in this way. And we have a second picture in Jakob's presentation, which is for freight transport. Yeah, derived from the backcasting process, we have concrete goals for the switch to zero-emission vehicles. And by 2030, 100% of all new cars and brands registrations, as well as HGVs under 18 tons, have to be zero emissions. And HGVs over 18 tons have to follow in the year 2035. The findings and goals of the Mobility Master Plan are now translated into the sub-strategies and like the Master Plan for Freight Transport. And here I will give the word to my colleague Jakob and we'll go on to his presentation.